There's a cruel arithmetic to survival that no one teaches you until you're already drowning in its equations. We tell ourselves that the strong survive and the weak perish, as if strength were something you could measure in muscle and bone, in the sharpness of fangs, or the ranking of your wolf. But I learned the truth on the night I was meant to die. Sometimes survival isn't about being the strongest in the room. Sometimes it's about being the one thing no one expects you to be. Sometimes the Omega who bleeds liquid moonlight instead of crimson, who carries death in their veins where others carry life, becomes the only one left standing when the dawn finally breaks. And sometimes, just sometimes, the monster who means to kill you becomes the only one who truly sees what you are beneath the curse of your birth. The morning they discovered my affliction, the clouds hung low over the village of Valdris like a shroud waiting to fall. I was 12, just old enough for my first shift, and my parents had gathered the pack healers to witness what should have been a celebration. "Cut her palm," Elder Theron instructed, his voice heavy with suspicion. Even then, I was too small, too quiet, too different from my siblings who carried themselves with the natural confidence of true-born wolves. The blade was sharp, the cut clean. But what dripped onto the ceremonial stone wasn't the deep red of wolf blood. It was silver, lustrous and wrong, pooling like liquid moonlight on the ancient rock. My mother's scream still echoes in my nightmares. "Mercury blood," the healer whispered, backing away. "The Omega carries mercury blood. In our world, blood tells everything. Red blood means life, strength, the ability to heal and fight and breed strong pups. But silver? Liquid mercury flowing through veins meant death to any wolf who touched it. My blood could kill with a single drop, making me untouchable in the most literal sense. No mate would ever claim me. No pack would ever truly accept me. I was death wrapped in an Omega's fragile form. They named me Lysandra, meaning liberator in the old tongue. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The only thing I could liberate others from was life itself. My father, Beta Marcus, tried to hide his revulsion behind duty. My mother simply stopped looking at me altogether. My siblings learned to keep their distance, taught by whispered warnings and fearful glances. Only my youngest brother Kai sometimes forgot to be afraid, but even he learned eventually. The pack couldn't exile me. That would be too cruel. Instead, they built me a cottage at the very edge of our territory, where the forest grew thick and dark. They assigned me tasks requiring no physical contact: record keeping, translating old texts, maintaining archives no one else wanted to bother with. I became a ghost haunting my own life. But ghosts see things others miss. From my exile, I watched. I listened. I noticed patterns in the night sky that spoke of changes coming. I heard whispers of missing Omegas from neighboring packs. I saw fear creeping into warriors' eyes when they spoke of the North. The North, where the Alpha King ruled from his fortress of black stone. Fenris Nightshade, who, according to the darkest rumors, had developed a taste for entertainment of the cruelest sort. "He makes them fight," a traveling merchant whispered one day, unaware I was listening. "Throws them in the pit with dire wolves. Takes bets on how long they'll last." "I heard he's searching for something specific," another replied. "Someone special." I had discovered that my affliction had unexpected uses. Mercury ink never faded. Mixed with regular ink, just a drop, and any document became impossible to forge. The pack used my blood for their most important treaties, though they never acknowledged where the special ink came from. This small purpose kept me sane through years of isolation. That and the books. I devoured every text I could find, learned languages no one in Valdris had spoken for centuries, memorized battle strategies I'd never use, and healing techniques I could never practice. By my 20th winter, I had become exactly what they expected, an afflicted thing living at the edge of the world, useful only for the death I carried in my veins. The night everything changed started like any other. Rain lashed against my cottage windows as I sat translating an old text about the first wolves. The knock at my door was so unexpected, I nearly spilled my ink pot. Beta Marcus stood there, rain streaming down his face, his expression a mixture of resignation and regret. "Lysandra," he said, using my name for the first time in years. "The Alpha King's emissary has come. He demands tribute from every pack, one Omega delivered to his fortress before the new moon." I understood immediately. Who better to send to their death than the Omega who was already dead to them? "When?" I asked, my voice steady. "Tonight, within the hour." He turned to go, then paused. "I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it has to be you." But he wasn't sorry enough to send anyone else. As I packed my few belongings, I thought about that arithmetic of survival. They were sending me to die, yes, but they were also sending the Alpha King something he'd never encountered before. An Omega whose very blood was poison, who had spent 8 years learning to be dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with claws or fangs. Perhaps the strong really would survive. Perhaps, for once, that might actually be me. The journey north took 3 days, though it felt like a lifetime compressed into heartbeats. I rode in the back of a prison wagon, the kind used for transporting rogues to execution. The guards kept their distance, more afraid of accidental contact than any escape attempt. Through the bars, I watched my world disappear. First, the familiar forests of Valdris, then the merchant towns I'd only seen from afar, finally giving way to the harsh, mountainous terrain of the Northern Territories. Each mile that passed, I catalogued my inadequacies. 20 years of existence, and what did I have to show for it? No pack bonds, for who could bond with poison? No friends, for who would risk death for companionship? No mate mark on my neck, no pups to carry forward any legacy, though what line would want to continue this affliction? The other Omegas in neighboring packs had lives I could only observe from shadows. They had gentle hands that could heal minor wounds with their touch. They had scents that soothed and calmed their packmates during times of stress. They bore children who would grow strong and continue bloodlines. They were treasured, protected, cherished for their softness in a world of sharp edges. I was the sharp edge everyone avoided. My mercury blood made me a living weapon, but one that couldn't be wielded. What good is a sword that cuts the hand that holds it? What purpose does a shield serve if it kills those it means to protect? The healers had tried everything in those early years: binding spells, purification rituals, even old mountain remedies meant to correct defective pups. Nothing worked. The worst part wasn't the isolation, though that carved its own special wounds. The worst part was the hope that died slowly, degree by degree, year by year. I remembered being 13, still naive enough to believe I might find a way to be useful. I had tried to help during harvest season, only to have an entire field's worth of wheat wither and die after I'd handled the seeds with bare hands. The pack had nearly starved that winter. I remembered being 15 when young wolves started finding their mates. I would sit at my window and watch the mating runs, see joy on newly bonded pairs' faces, and tell myself that somewhere out there was someone whose body could withstand my touch. But the healers had been clear. My blood would poison any mate bond. I remembered being 17 when I'd discovered my blood's preservative properties and thought I'd finally found my purpose. But even that small victory was tainted. They used what I could provide, but never acknowledged the provider. I became a tool, not a person. A resource to be managed, not a pack member to be valued. By 18, I'd stopped trying to attend pack gatherings. My presence made mothers clutch their pups closer, made warriors touch their weapons reflexively. Even in a crowd, I stood in empty space, surrounded by an invisible barrier of fear. The Omega designation made it worse. Omegas were meant to be the heart of the pack, the ones who brought comfort and cohesion. We were supposed to be the gentle souls who balanced the aggression of alphas and the ambition of betas. But what peace could I bring when my very presence inspired terror? I had become a contradiction that hurt to exist as an Omega who repelled rather than attracted, who isolated rather than united, who brought death rather than life. The wagon hit a particularly deep rut, jolting me from my brooding. Through the bars, I could see we were climbing higher into the mountains. Snow began to fall, thick flakes clinging to everything. "Almost there," one guard muttered to his companion. "Thank the gods. This job gives me the creeps. Better than being the poor bastard who has to deliver her to the castle." The other replied, "You hear what happened to the last tribute from the Eastern Packs? Dead within an hour. They say the Alpha King didn't even shift, just tore her throat out with his human teeth. This one might last longer. Mercury blood's got to be worth something, right?" They both glanced back at me, and I kept my face carefully blank. Let them think I was resigned to my fate. Let them believe the broken Omega had no fight left. But beneath the wounds, beneath years of rejection and isolation, something else had grown. Call it spite. Call it survival instinct. Call it the simple refusal to make their lives easier by dying quietly. I had spent 8 years being treated as less than nothing. I had endured their fear, their disgust, their careful cruelty of exclusion. They thought they were sending a lamb to slaughter, a final solution to the problem of Lysandra the Cursed. They had no idea what 20 years of pain could forge in someone with nothing left to lose. As the Alpha King's fortress came into view, a massive structure of black stone that seemed to devour the light around it, I inventoried my wounds one last time. Yes, I was broken in all the ways that mattered to normal wolves. Yes, I carried death in my veins and isolation in my bones. But I was also something they never bothered to see. I was educated in ways most wolves weren't. I had observed pack dynamics from the outside for so long that I understood them better than those swimming in them. I knew 17 different languages, including the old tongue that even most scholars had forgotten. Most importantly, I had learned to find strength in solitude, to forge weapons from wounds. They thought my blood was my only burden. They had no idea it might also be my salvation. The fortress gates loomed ahead, and I straightened my spine. Whatever awaited me inside those black walls, it couldn't be worse than the slow death of existing as nothing. At least here, I might die as something more than a mistake. The throne room of the Alpha King was carved from a single piece of obsidian, polished until it reflected torchlight like dark water. I stood in chains before the dais, surrounded by guards who kept careful distance, having been warned about what my blood could do. Other tributes huddled nearby, omegas from various packs, all trembling with terror that perfumed the air with the sour scent of fear. I had expected grandeur, but this was something else entirely. The walls bore deep gouges, as if massive claws had raked across them in fury. Dark stains marred the floor in patterns suggesting violence so extreme it had become art. And at the center of it all, sprawled across a throne that seemed carved from nightmares, sat Alpha King Fenris Nightshade. He was devastatingly beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful, all power and destruction wrapped in perfect form. Silver-white hair fell past his shoulders, an unusual color for a wolf so young. His eyes were pale blue of winter ice, and when they fixed on me, I felt the weight of a predator's attention. "So!" His voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "These are this season's offerings." He rose from his throne with liquid grace, moving down the line of tributes. Some whimpered, one fainted. When he reached me, he stopped, nostrils flaring. "You smell of silver and sorrow," he murmured, circling me slowly. "Beta Marcus sent me his afflicted daughter. How predictable." I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to give him the satisfaction of my fear. He was close enough now that I could smell him, pine and iron, and something wild that made my omega instincts scream contradictory commands. "Tell me, little curse," he continued, "do you know why I demand tributes?" When I didn't answer, his hand shot out, gripping my chin and forcing me to meet his gaze. The guards tensed, but he showed no fear of my blood. "I asked you a question." "Entertainment, I assume." I managed through his grip. "The mighty Alpha King grows bored and demands new toys." He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Entertainment? Yes, I suppose that's what they would think." He released me, wiping his hand on his leather pants as if I'd contaminated him. "Very well. Let me entertain you all with tonight's game." He gestured to great doors at the far end of the throne room. They groaned open, revealing a circular chamber beyond, lit by hundreds of candles. "My arena," Fenris announced, "where we play a very simple game. Survive from sundown to sunrise, and I'll grant you a place in my household. Fail." He smiled, showing teeth too sharp for his human form. "Well, failure has its own rewards." One omega, a delicate male from the river packs, fell to his knees. "Please, Your Majesty, we're not fighters. We're omegas. We can't—" Fenris moved so fast, I barely saw it. One moment, he stood by the arena entrance. The next, he had the pleading omega by the throat, lifted off the ground. "Can't?" he snarled. "Then you'll die. Natural selection at its finest." He dropped the omega, who scrambled backward, gasping. "But I'm not entirely without mercy. You may choose your opponent for the night, another tribute, one of my warriors, or—" His smile widened. "Me." The other tributes erupted in panic. Some begged for the chance to fight each other, assuming another omega would be the easiest opponent. I remained silent, processing the situation. This wasn't simple cruelty. There was something calculated in his eyes, something searching. He wasn't just looking for entertainment. He was looking for something specific. "What about you, Mercury Blood?" He appeared in front of me again with that unnatural speed. "Who will you choose to dance with tonight?" I met his gaze steadily. The smart choice would be another Omega. The safe choice would be one of his warriors. But I'd spent 20 years making safe choices, and where had it gotten me? You, I said clearly. The throne room went silent. Even the guards stopped breathing. Fenris tilted his head, studying me with those predator eyes. Brave or stupid, little curse. Curious, I admitted. An alpha king who plays games with tributes instead of simply killing them. Who speaks of entertainment but looks for something else. Who touches a poisonous Omega without fear. You're not what you pretend to be. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Then the mask of cruel amusement slammed back into place. Midnight, he said softly. The arena. Come armed or unarmed, I care not. But come ready to show me what Marcus's mistake can do besides bleed silver. He turned to the guards. Take them to the tribute quarters. Feed them, let them rest. Tonight, we see who among them deserves to see another dawn. As they herded us out, I caught a glimpse of him ascending his throne again. For just a moment, when he thought no one was looking, I saw exhaustion seep into his features. His hand went to his chest, pressing against something beneath his shirt, and his face contorted with what looked like pain. Then he noticed my attention, and the moment shattered. The cruel smile returned, and he gave me a mocking salute. The tribute quarters were sparse but clean, a row of cells with basic amenities. The others huddled together, whispering frantically about strategies and alliances. I sat apart, thinking. Every instinct honed through years of isolation screamed that there was more to this than simple blood sport. Real cruelty didn't announce itself so boldly. And then there was the way he touched me. No fear, no hesitation. Either he was completely insane, or he knew something about my condition that I didn't. You're going to die, the Riverpack Omega whispered through the bars. No one survives a night with him. We're all touched by darkness in our own ways, I replied, lying back on the narrow cot. As midnight approached and guards came to escort me to the arena, I wondered if perhaps I'd finally found someone whose darkness might match my own. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, for the first time in 8 years, I felt truly alive. The arena at midnight was a different beast entirely. The candles had been extinguished, replaced by an eerie blue-white glow emanating from crystals embedded in the walls. The weapons still lined the walls, but now I could see they weren't ordinary steel. Each blade gleamed with the same unnatural light as the crystals, etched with runes that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. I stood in the center, wearing simple fighting leathers they'd provided. I'd chosen no weapon. What was the point? I'd never trained with any of them, and holding sharp objects when fighting an Alpha King seemed like a good way to end up stabbing myself. Fenris entered through the opposite door, and my breath caught. He'd stripped down to fitted pants and nothing else, revealing a body that was a testament to violence survived. Scars crisscrossed his torso in patterns too deliberate to be random. But it was the tattoo over his heart that made me stare. A black sun being devoured by a silver moon, the ink seeming to pulse with its own life. "No weapon?" he asked, beginning to circle me. Disappointing. I hoped for more creativity from someone who chose death so readily. "I am my own weapon," I replied, circling opposite him, maintaining distance. He laughed again. "Yes, I suppose you are. Tell me, When did you last touch someone without killing them? The question was so unexpected, I almost stumbled. Never. Never held your mother's hand? Never embraced a friend? Never felt warmth of another's skin without it ending in screams? Each question was a dagger finding gaps in armor I didn't know I wore. Why does it matter? Because I'm curious, he said, then moved. He was fast, faster than any wolf I'd ever seen. I barely managed to dodge, feeling wind from his strike brush my cheek. But instead of following up, he danced back, studying me. Interesting. You move like someone who spent their life watching others fight. He attacked again, a series of strikes that should have overwhelmed me. But I'd read every combat manual in Valdris's library, memorized every diagram. My body might be untrained, but my mind knew the patterns. I slipped between his attacks, never quite where he expected. "You're not fighting!" he growled, increasing his speed. "You said survive until sunrise." I panted, narrowly avoiding his claws. "Not defeat the Alpha King." He stopped so suddenly I nearly ran into him. "Clever little curse, but survival isn't always about running." His next attack was different, calculated to corner me against the wall. I had nowhere left to dodge. His hand closed around my throat, not tight enough to choke, but firm enough to hold. We both froze, waiting for my blood to do its work. Nothing happened. His skin didn't blister. He didn't convulse in agony. He just held me there, his face inches from mine, those ice blue eyes boring into my soul. "Impossible," I whispered. "Is it?" He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Did you really think I'd challenge a Mercury Omega without knowing I could touch her?" He released me and stepped back, flexing his unmarked hand. "Your turn." "My turn for what?" "To attack me? Or did you think this would be entirely one-sided?" I stared at him, mind racing. He could touch me. No one could touch me, but he just had, and he was still standing, still smirking like he knew all my secrets. "I don't know how to fight." "Lie." He began circling again. "You know exactly how to fight. You've been fighting your whole life. You just don't use claws." Something in his words ignited anger I'd buried for years. Fine. He wanted to see how I fought? I reached up and drew my nail across my palm, letting silver blood well up. His eyes tracked the movement, but he didn't retreat. I flicked my hand, sending droplets flying toward him. He didn't dodge. The blood hit his chest, and I waited for screams, for sizzling flesh. Instead, the drops rolled off him like mercury on glass, leaving no mark. "My turn," he said softly, and then he shifted. But it wasn't like any shift I'd ever seen. Normal wolves transformed in seconds, their human shape flowing into wolf form like water. Fenris broke apart. His bones snapped audibly, reforming at impossible angles. His skin split and resealed. When it was over, what stood before me wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite man, but something caught between. Towering, bipedal, covered in white fur with those same ice blue eyes. A dire wolf. The monsters of legend that hadn't walked the earth in 1,000 years. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a strange kinship. We were both impossible things, existing outside nature's laws. He stalked toward me and I held my ground. Those massive claws could tear me in half, but they hadn't yet. This was still a test, still a game with rules I didn't understand. When he was close enough that I could feel heat radiating from his transformed body, he spoke, words distorted by his monstrous muzzle. "Show me what else you can do, silver blood. Show me why the moon cursed you with mercury veins." The moon? He knew about the moon. "I don't understand," I said. "Then let me educate you." He grabbed my bleeding hand, pressing it against the tattoo over his heart. "Feel." Power slammed into me like a physical force. Images flooded my mind. A younger Fenris screaming as silver was poured into wounds carved into his chest. A woman with moon-white eyes speaking words in the old tongue. Decades of agony as his body learned to process what should have killed him. I jerked back, gasping. You did this to yourself?" To become strong enough to unite the packs, sacrifices were required. His form rippled, struggling between wolf and man. "But every strength comes with a price. I gained immunity to silver, to wolfsbane, to every poison our kind fears. But I lost the ability to fully control my shifts. Under the full moon, I become something else. That's why you need tributes," I breathed, understanding flooding through me. "Not for entertainment, for protection, from yourself." His wolf head tilted. "Clever girl, but you're only half right. I don't need protection from myself." His form finally settled back into mostly human. "I need someone who can survive me when I'm lost to the beast. Someone who might bring me back." The weight of what he was asking settled over me like a shroud. He wasn't looking for victims. He was looking for an anchor. "Why would I help the monster who kidnaps Omegas?" "Because," he said, approaching slowly, "you're as tired of being alone as I am. Because you've spent 20 years being feared for something you can't control. Because maybe, just maybe, two afflictions might cancel each other out." He was close enough to touch again, and this time, when his hand reached for my face, I didn't flinch. His fingers were gentle against my cheek, and I realized this was the first time anyone had touched me tenderly since I was 12 years old. "The full moon is in 3 nights," he said. "If you can survive that, then we'll discuss what comes next." Dawn came like a whispered promise, the crystals gradually dimming as natural light filtered through high windows. We'd spent the remaining hours in a strange dance, him teaching me basic defense moves, me showing him the other properties of my blood I'd discovered over the years. "It preserves," I explained, letting a drop fall onto a withered rose from a wall vase. Within moments, the petals brightened, became fuller, as if frozen at the moment of perfect bloom. "Documents written with it never fade. Organic material treated with it resists decay." Fenris studied the restored rose with calculating eyes. "What else?" "It burns through lies." I pulled out a small vial I always carried, mixing a drop with regular ink. "Write something false, and the words will literally eat through the page." My pack used it for treaties, though they'd never admit it. "Useful." He took the vial, examining the silver liquid within. "Have you ever tried ingesting it yourself?" I stared at him. "That would be suicide." "Would it? You produce it naturally. Your body doesn't poison itself." The thought had never occurred to me. My blood was death to others, so I'd assumed, but he was right. I lived with it flowing through my veins every day. "Tomorrow night," he said, returning the vial, "we test that theory. But first, You need to understand what you're truly agreeing to. He led me from the arena through corridors I hadn't seen before. The castle was a labyrinth of black stone and impossible architecture. We emerged onto a balcony suspended impossibly high above a chasm that yawned between mountain peaks. 3 nights from now, when the moon rises full, I will transform, he said, gripping the railing. Not into the dire wolf you saw, but something worse. Something that exists only to hunt, to kill, to gorge itself on blood until the moon sets. I've tried everything. Chains break, cages crumble, magical barriers mean nothing to that thing. How many have died? Every tribute who's tried. Dozens of my own guards, my own beta, who believed his loyalty could reach the man inside the monster. His voice went hollow. I tore out his throat and painted the walls with his blood. Then why keep trying? He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw past the cruel king facade to the exhausted man beneath. Because the affliction is spreading. Each moon, I stay transformed longer. Each time, I range farther. Last month, I woke up 3 territories away, surrounded by the remains of an entire patrol unit. Soon, I won't come back at all. And you think I can stop that? I think you're the first person I've met who might survive long enough to try. He pulled something from his pocket, a collar of black metal inscribed with runes that hurt to look at. This was crafted by the witch who cursed me. She said it would only work when I found someone whose nature opposed mine fundamentally. Monster and what? I don't know. That's what we need to find out. He held out the collar. Wear this for the next 3 nights. Let it taste your blood, learn your essence. When the moon rises, we'll see if opposites truly attract or if they simply destroy each other more efficiently. I took the collar, the metal cold against my skin. The moment it touched my mercury blood, the runes flared violet, then settled into a steady pulse that matched my heartbeat. It accepts you, he breathed, something like hope flickering across his features. No one else has gotten that far. What happens if it works? Then you become my anchor, the one who holds my leash when the beast emerges. His smile was sharp and sad. Congratulations, little curse. You might have just volunteered to become the most dangerous position in the kingdom. I fastened the collar around my throat, feeling the weight of it like a promise. Better than dying forgotten in a cottage at the edge of nowhere? Is it? He moved closer, fingers ghosting over the collar. You could still run. I'd let you. Give you gold, safe passage to the eastern kingdoms where my reach doesn't extend. But alone, but alive. I thought of 20 years of isolation, of watching life happen around me but never being part of it. I've been alive, I said. It's overrated. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. Then we prepare. 3 nights to teach you everything I know about surviving monsters. As he led me back through the impossible corridors, I touched the collar at my throat. It pulsed with warmth now, as if my blood had awakened something sleeping within the metal. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. By day, I learned the castle's layout, memorizing escape routes I'd probably never use. Fenris showed me secret passages, hidden chambers, places where the castle's magic was strongest. Remember, he said, demonstrating a specific whistle pattern. The beast responds to sound differently than sight. High pitches cause pain. Low frequencies can sometimes calm it. By night, we experimented with my blood. I discovered I could control its toxicity to some degree. Diluted with water, it became merely caustic rather than fatal. Mixed with certain herbs, it could induce sleep rather than death. And when I finally, tremblingly, placed a drop on my own tongue, I felt power surge through me like liquid lightning. "Your eyes," Fenris said, watching intently. "They're glowing." I caught my reflection in a polished shield. My normally dark eyes had turned silver, luminous as moonlight. The effect lasted only minutes, but while it did, I felt different, stronger. "We'll explore that more after the full moon," he said, "if there is an after." The final night before the full moon, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the castle, eventually finding myself in a tower room I hadn't seen before. Star charts covered the walls, tracking lunar cycles going back decades. Red marks indicated full moons, and beside each, a number. Deaths, I realized. Morbid reading? I turned to find Fenris in the doorway, looking as sleepless as I felt. Realistic reading, I corrected. The numbers stopped getting worse after the first few years. I learned to lock myself away better. He joined me at the charts, but lately, the locks don't hold. The beast is getting stronger. Or you're getting tired of fighting it. He looked at me sharply. What makes you say that? Because I recognize the exhaustion. 20 years of fighting what you are, it wears you down. Is that what you were doing? When you chose to fight me instead of another Omega? I considered the question honestly. Maybe. Or maybe I was choosing to start. To stop being the tragic Omega bleeding Mercury in her cottage and start being something else. And what have you become? I touched the collar, feeling it pulse with my heartbeat. I guess we'll find out tomorrow night. By day, the castle showed me two faces. In the public spaces, the great hall, the throne room, the training grounds, I saw Fenris the Alpha King. He was magnificent in his cruelty, holding court with an iron fist that never trembled. Nobles cowered before him. Warriors competed viciously for his approval. Servants scattered like mice when he passed. "You're too soft on them," he'd drawl from his throne, watching a beta whip a servant who'd spilled wine. In my grandfather's day, such clumsiness meant losing the offending hand. The court would laugh nervously, unsure if he was joking. I stood in my designated place, not quite servant, not quite guest, wearing the collar that marked me as something other. They called me the king's experiment when they thought I couldn't hear. Or sometimes, more cruelly, the silver whore. But at night, in the private wings where only I was permitted, I met a different man entirely. "Hold still," Fenris murmured, carefully drawing my blood into crystal vials. We sat in his private study, surrounded by texts in languages I was still learning to read. "Tell me if it hurts." "It doesn't," I said, watching him work with surprising gentleness. "Why the act?" "What act?" "The tyrant king, the monster who enjoys suffering." He sealed the vial, adding it to the dozens he'd already collected. "Who says it's an act?" But his hands were careful as he bandaged the small cut, and when he thought I wasn't looking, I caught him wincing at the sounds of pain echoing from the training grounds below. "Power maintained through love is easily corrupted," he said finally. "Fear is cleaner, more reliable." "Lonelier," I added. "Yes." He moved to his desk, pulling out a journal filled with notes in his sharp handwriting. Your blood reacts differently to various stimuli. Mercury under moonlight becomes almost luminescent. Mixed with wolfsbane, it neutralizes the poison entirely. But this, he showed me a page covered in diagrams. This is what interests me most. I don't read ancient chemistry, I admitted. Your blood doesn't just preserve or poison, he explained. It transforms. It takes the nature of what it touches and inverts it. Poison becomes cure. Decay becomes preservation. Death becomes life? Potentially? He set down the journal. Tomorrow is the second night. We need to test the collar's limits. He led me to a chamber I hadn't seen before, circular and windowless, carved with protective runes. At its center sat a pool of water so still it looked like black glass. Scrying pool, he explained, but modified. Step in. The water was surprisingly warm, rising to my waist as I waded to the center. The collar at my throat began to pulse more rapidly. Now, he said, pulling out a vial of my blood. We see what happens when curse meets curse. He poured the mercury blood into the pool. Immediately, the water began to glow, silver mixing with black to create something that looked like liquid starlight. The collar grew hot against my skin, and I gasped as power surged through me. Images flooded my mind, not my own memories, but his. I saw a young prince, proud and cruel, spurning a woman who offered him her heart. Saw her transform into something ancient and terrible, moon-white eyes blazing with power. Felt the curse take hold, twisting his body into shapes that shouldn't exist. But there was more. I saw him after. The years of learning to control it. The battles fought to unite the fractured packs. The careful construction of his monster reputation to hide the worst monster within. And threaded through it all, loneliness so profound it made my own isolation look like gentle solitude. I surfaced from the visions gasping, finding him kneeling at the pool's edge, one hand extended toward me. What did you see? He asked urgently. Everything, I whispered. The witch. The curse, I stopped, realizing what else I'd seen. You've been searching for me, not just someone with mercury blood, me specifically. He helped me from the pool, water streaming from my clothes. The witch spoke a prophecy after she cursed me. Only when the moon's mistake finds the sun's redemption will the beast know peace. I thought it was nonsense. Until reports came of an Omega who bled liquid silver under the full moon of her first shift. You've known about me for 8 years? I've been searching for you for 8 years, he corrected, quietly, carefully. I couldn't risk other packs realizing your value. When Beta Marcus finally offered you as tribute, I nearly laughed at the irony. He threw away the very thing I'd tear apart kingdoms to possess. Possess, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. His hand cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. Poor choice of words. I meant, you're not a thing to be owned, Lysandra. You're the answer to a question I've been screaming at the moon for 20 years. What if I'm not? What if the collar fails? Then I'll send you away before the moon rises and pray I don't find your corpse in the morning. His thumb traced my cheekbone. But I don't think it will fail. Do you know why? I shook my head. Because for the first time since the curse took hold, I can touch someone without my wolf trying to tear its way out. He pulled me closer, and I realized he was right. No shift rippled beneath his skin. No beast fought for control. You quiet him, Even now, I can barely feel him stirring. Maybe he recognizes a fellow monster, I said, trying for lightness. Maybe he recognizes home, Fenris countered and kissed me. It should have been impossible. 20 years of being untouchable, and here was the most dangerous man in the realm pressing his lips to mine with desperate gentleness. The collar pulsed between us, our afflictions singing in harmony, and for one perfect moment, neither of us was monster or mistake. We were just two people finding solace in shared darkness. When we broke apart, his eyes had shifted to wolf gold, but there was no violence in them, only wonder. One more night, he said. One more night to prepare. And then we see if beauty can truly tame the beast, I finished. He laughed, the sound free of its usual broken edges. Beauty? You're a poisonous Omega who speaks in riddles and bleeds liquid moonlight. If anything, you're a beast of a different kind. Then maybe that's what it takes, I said, touching the collar that bound us. A beast to tame a beast. The final day dawned gray and oppressive. The castle itself seemed to sense what was coming. Corridors shifted more frequently, the lights flickered without cause, and even the bravest servants spoke in whispers. I spent the morning in the library, trying to distract myself with research. But every text about curses and transformations just reminded me of what was coming. Finding some light reading? Fenris asked, appearing in the doorway. Looking for hope, I admitted, closing a particularly grim account. And history suggests I should have taken your offer to run. He sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. History didn't account for you. Because I'm special? The words came out more bitter than intended. Because you're impossible? He corrected. Mercury blood shouldn't exist. Omegas who survive their own poison shouldn't exist. Women who look at monsters and see wounded men shouldn't exist. Yet, here you are. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe nature has limits for a reason. He was quiet for a moment. Do you want to leave? There's still time. I turned to look at him, really look. Beneath the kingly bearing and the carefully controlled expression, I saw the truth. He was terrified. Not of dying, not of remaining cursed, but of hurting me. No, I said simply. We do this together, or not at all. Relief flickered across his features before he hid it. Then we should make the most of our last day. The final night before the full moon, Fenris led me through passages I'd memorized over the past days. But instead of the training chambers or his study, we emerged in a wing I'd never seen. The walls here were different, carved with scenes of pack life. Wolves running together, families gathered around fires, pups playing in meadow grass. This was my mother's wing, he explained, pushing open doors that groaned with disuse. I sealed it after the curse, but tonight I want to show you something. The room beyond took my breath away. Unlike the stark black stone of the rest of the castle, this space bloomed with color. Tapestries depicting the 4 seasons covered the walls. And everywhere, on shelves, tables, filling entire cases, were books. My mother collected stories, he said, running his fingers along dusty spines. Fairy tales, histories, myths from every corner of the realm. She believed that stories held truth in ways facts couldn't capture. I moved through the room in a daze, recognizing titles I'd only heard whispered about. How is this possible? She was a scholar before she was a queen. He pulled out a slim volume bound in silver-touched leather. This was her favorite, The Last Moon Singer. It's about a woman whose voice could calm the wildest beasts, who sang the moon to sleep each night to prevent it from driving wolves mad. I've never heard that story. No one tells it anymore. The moon singer gave up her voice to save her pack, and with it, lost the very thing that made her special. He handed me the book. She spent the rest of her days silent, watching the wolves she'd saved forget why the moon no longer drove them to madness. I clutched the book carefully, understanding the parallel he was drawing. Is that what you think will happen? If the collar works, I'll lose what makes me me? I think sacrifice always demands payment, he said carefully. But I also think my mother was wrong about the story's meaning. The moon singer didn't lose what made her special when she gave up her voice. She proved it. Her specialness wasn't in the singing. It was in the choice to sing, even knowing the cost. Pretty words, I said, but my throat was tight. Is that why you brought me here? To wrap my potential death in metaphor? No. He moved to another case, pulling out journal after journal. I brought you here for these. I opened one at random and found pages covered in familiar handwriting. My own, but younger, less refined. My breath caught. These are every story you ever submitted to the Pack archives, every translation you did that they filed away without credit, every poem you thought burned with the autumn refuse. He gestured to the journals. I've been collecting them for years. Why? The word came out strangled. Because they're brilliant, he said simply. Because while your pack saw only your blood as valuable, I read your words and saw a mind that understood pain and beauty as two faces of the same truth. Because you wrote about loneliness with such precision, it made my own isolation bearable. I sank onto a dusty chair, overwhelmed. 20 years of writing in secret, believing my words as worthless as the rest of me, and here they were, preserved like treasures. The riddle you told that first night, he continued. I am held by those who cannot touch me, broken by those who never speak me, kept by those who never sought me. Kings command me, but I command fate. I knew the answer the moment you spoke it. A promise, I whispered. A promise, he agreed. But more than that, a story. Every story is a promise between teller and listener, between past and future, between what is and what could be. You've been telling stories your whole life, Lysandra, even when no one was listening. But I've been listening. He knelt before me, taking my hands in his. Tomorrow, when the moon rises, I need you to know this. Whether the collar works or not, whether we survive or not, your stories matter. You matter. Not because of your blood, not because of any curse or cure, but because you've spent 20 years creating beauty in the midst of horror. Fenris, I began, but he pressed on. I've arranged everything. If something happens to me tomorrow, the castle is yours. The library, the resources, everything. Turn it into what it should have been. A sanctuary for the different, the afflicted, the cast aside. Tell their stories. Tell our story. Stop talking like you're going to die, I said fiercely. We're both going to die eventually, he replied with that sharp smile. But tomorrow, we might just live first. Really live, not just survive. He stood, pulling me up with him. Choose any books you want for your chambers." We spent the remaining hours filling my arms with books, talking about stories and curses and the thin line between the two. He showed me his mother's private notes, her theories about the nature of shape-shifting. "She would have loved you," he said as the sky began to lighten. "A storyteller with Mercury blood who speaks truth to tyrants." "I'm not a wolf," I reminded him. "No," he agreed, walking me back to my chambers as dawn broke. "You're something rarer. You're the moon's apology for all the madness she brings, silver light in liquid form, stories in a world that forgot how to listen." At my door, he paused. "Tonight," he said simply. "Tonight," I agreed, but as he turned to go, I caught his hand. "Fenris? The answer isn't just promise. It's every story ever told, every word that bridges the gap between one soul and another. We're all held by stories we can't touch, broken by words never spoken, kept by tales we never asked for. But in the end, stories command fate by reshaping how we see it." He squeezed my hand, eyes bright with something that might have been tears or might have been hope. "Then tell me a story with a happy ending tomorrow, even if you have to make it up." "The best stories," I said, "are the ones we make true." As my door closed between us, I clutched the books to my chest and prepared for the longest day of my life. Tomorrow night, under the full moon, we'd either break our curses or be broken by them. But for the first time in 20 years, I had something worth fighting for besides survival. I had someone who saw me not as the poisoned Omega or the silver curse, but as the storyteller who made beauty from pain. The full moon rose like a silver eye opening in the darkness, and I stood in the center of the arena, the collar burning cold against my throat. Fenris paced the perimeter, his body already beginning to tremor with the change. "You can still leave," he growled, his voice distorting as his vocal cords began to shift. "The guards won't stop you. I ordered them." "I know what you ordered," I interrupted. "You've given me 17 different escape routes in the last hour. I'm not taking any of them." He stopped pacing, fixing me with eyes that flickered between ice blue and molten gold. "You don't understand what's coming. The dire wolf you saw was nothing. This is—" He doubled over, gasping. "This is primordial, older than thought, older than reason. It won't recognize you, won't care about stories or promises or—" His words cut off in a scream that became a howl. I watched, horrified and transfixed, as his body began to tear itself apart. This wasn't the fluid shift I'd witnessed before. This was violence made manifest. Bones didn't just break. They shattered and reformed in configurations that defied nature. His skin split like overripe fruit, revealing something underneath that wasn't quite flesh, wasn't quite shadow. The collar at my throat pulsed frantically, its runes blazing violet white. My mercury blood responded, heating in my veins until I felt like I was burning from the inside out. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But I held my ground, even as the thing that had been Fenris completed its transformation. What stood before me defied description. It was wolf-shaped in the way a nightmare is human-shaped, a suggestion of form without the comfort of familiarity. It stood 15 feet tall on legs that bent in too many places. Its fur was not white, but the absence of color, as if it devoured light. And its eyes were holes in reality, darker than the space between stars. The beast's head swiveled toward me, and I felt its attention like a physical weight. There was no recognition there, no spark of the man who'd given me his mother's books. This was hunger given form, madness made manifest. It moved, and the world blurred. One moment it was across the arena, the next its claws were inches from my throat. I didn't dodge, I couldn't have even if I'd tried. But the collar flared, and the beast's claws stopped as if hitting an invisible wall. The creature snarled, circling me, testing. Each time it lunged, the collar repelled it, but I could feel the strain. The metal grew so cold it burned, and frost began to form on my skin. "Fenris," I said, my voice barely steady. "I know you're in there." The beast's only response was to attack more viciously. Its claws left gouges in the stone floor. Its howls shattered the crystal lights, plunging us into darkness lit only by the moon and the collar's desperate glow. This wasn't working. The collar could protect me, but it couldn't reach him. I was just another obstacle, another thing to destroy once it figured out how to break through the barrier. My mind raced through everything I'd learned, the stories his mother collected, the nature of curses, the way my blood inverted everything it touched. And suddenly, horribly, I understood what needed to happen. The collar wasn't meant to protect me. It was meant to channel me. "Oh," I whispered, the realization hitting like a physical blow. "Oh, you clever, manipulative bastard." He'd known. Of course he'd known. All his talk of me surviving the night had been misdirection. The collar would keep me alive just long enough to do what needed to be done. The beast paused in its assault, head tilting as if sensing my shift in understanding. In that moment of stillness, I saw past the monster to the curse itself, a writhing mass of shadow and moonlight wrapped around what remained of Fenris's soul. The witch hadn't just transformed him. She'd infected him with a piece of primal chaos. To break it, I'd need to do more than survive. I'd need to let it in. My hands shook as I reached for the clasp of the collar. Every survival instinct rebelled. 20 years of isolation had taught me to protect myself above all else. Never let anyone close. Never risk the poison touch. Never, ever lower my defenses. But what was the point of surviving if it meant watching the only person who'd ever truly seen me disappear into madness? "You want to know a secret?" I said to the beast, my fingers finding the collar's release. "I've been dying since the day I was born. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of consciousness is just borrowed time before the inevitable. We're all cursed to die. The only choice is whether we do it alone." The beast's eyes fixed on mine, and for just a second, I thought I saw a flicker of blue in the darkness. "I choose not to be alone," I said, and released the collar. It fell away like discarded armor, and immediately the beast lunged. This time, nothing stopped it. Claws designed to rend reality pierced my skin, and my mercury blood sprayed across the arena floor. The pain was indescribable, not just physical, but existential, as if my very essence was being unraveled. But my blood touched the beast, and everything changed. Where silver met shadow, light exploded. The creature reeled back, howling, as my blood burned through its form like acid through paper. But this wasn't destruction. It was revelation. Each drop stripped away layers of curse, revealing the man trapped beneath. The beast thrashed, caught between forms. One moment it was the nightmarish direwolf, the next something closer to Fenris, then back again. It charged me repeatedly, each attack drawing more blood, each contact burning away more of the witch's poison. I fell to my knees, the world spinning as blood loss took its toll. But I could see it working. The shadow stuff of the curse was dissolving, unable to maintain its hold against the touch of liquid moonlight. More, I gasped, understanding flooding through me. You need more. With the last of my strength, I did something suicidal and necessary. I bit down on my own wrist, opening veins properly, letting quicksilver blood flow freely. The beast, maddened by pain and transformation, lunged one final time. Its fangs found my throat, and I let them. Mercury blood flooded its mouth, poured down its throat, worked into its system from the inside. The creature convulsed, its form flickering like a candle in a hurricane. I felt my life draining away, vision darkening at the edges. But I held on. If I was going to die, I'd make it count. The arena filled with impossible light as 20 years of curse met 20 years of poison and canceled each other out. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was Fenris, human, whole, covered in my silver blood but unmarked by it, catching me as I fell. "Lysandra," he was saying, his voice cracking. "No, no, no. This isn't how the story ends. You promised me a happy ending. You promised..." But promises, I thought as consciousness faded, were just stories we told ourselves about the future. And sometimes the best stories were the ones where the monster became a man, even if the storyteller had to close the book to make it happen. At least I wouldn't die alone. At least I'd finally touch someone without killing them. At least, in the end, I'd mattered. I woke to silver tears falling on my face. Not tears, blood. Mercury drops dripping from somewhere above me, each one burning with cold fire as it touched my skin. My throat ached with a pain that went beyond physical, and when I tried to speak, only a whistle of air emerged. "Don't!" Fenris's voice, rough with exhaustion and grief. "Don't try to talk. Your throat. I almost... Gods, Lysandra, I almost killed you." My eyes focused slowly. We were still in the arena, though dawn light filtered through the high windows. Fenris knelt beside me, cradling my head in his lap. His white hair was stained with quicksilver, his hands covered in my blood. But more importantly, he was human. Completely, utterly human, with no trace of the beast. I tried to smile, to show him it was worth it, but the movement sent fire through my neck. His hand immediately went to the wound, and I saw him flinch. "The healers can't touch you," he said quietly. "Your blood, even diluted, even mostly drained, it still burns them. I've been..." He held up his hands, showing me the cuts. "I've been bleeding into you, drop by drop, my blood to replace what you lost. It's the only thing keeping you alive." I wanted to tell him it was poetic, the monster's blood saving the poison girl. But my voice was gone, perhaps forever. The beast's fangs had torn through more than flesh. "The curse is broken," he continued, as if needing to fill the silence. "Completely. I can feel it. The absence where it lived for so long. You did it. You actually did it. But the cost..." Footsteps echoed in the arena. His beta, Rafe, appeared with several guards. They stopped at a careful distance, fear clear on their faces. "Your Majesty," Rafe said carefully, "the court is concerned. Rumors are spreading about what happened here. Some say the Omega is dead. Others claim she's transformed into something else. Tell them," Fenris said, not looking away from me, "that the tributes are canceled. Permanently. Any pack that has issue with that can take it up with me personally." "And the Omega?" The Omega saved their worthless lives. His voice hardened. Anyone who speaks against her will find out exactly what kind of monster I can be without a curse. After they left, he gathered me carefully in his arms. The journey through the castle was a blur of concerned faces and hurried whispers. Servants scattered, nobles stared, and through it all, Fenris carried me like something precious and breakable. His chambers were sparse, practical. He laid me on his bed, then began the slow work of changing my bandages. His hands were gentle but unpracticed. "I've never actually tended wounds before," he admitted. "Always had healers for that. But I'm learning. For you, I'm learning." Days passed in a haze of pain and slowly returning strength. Fenris never left my side, feeding me broth when I could manage it, reading to me from his mother's books when the pain kept me awake. He slept in a chair beside the bed, my hand in his. But as my body healed, a horrible truth became clear. My voice wasn't returning. The beast's fangs had destroyed something essential. I could breathe, could swallow with difficulty, but speech was beyond me. "We'll find a way," Fenris insisted when the diagnosis came. "There are specialists in the Eastern Kingdoms, magical procedures, ancient remedies. I'll tear apart the world to give you back your voice." I touched his face, trying to convey what I couldn't say. That it was enough, that I'd made my choice with open eyes, that a voice was a small price for his freedom. But I could see it eating at him. Guilt mixed with the cruel irony that I'd saved him with stories I could no longer tell. A week after the full moon, Fenris made an announcement that shook the kingdom. He stood before his court with me at his side, my throat still wrapped in silver-stained bandages. "Let it be known," he declared, "that the Omega Lysandra of Valdris has achieved what no other could. She has broken the curse that plagued your king. In recognition of this service, I name her Royal Chronicler with all the rights and protections of that office." The court erupted in whispers. An Omega holding a royal position was unprecedented. An afflicted Omega who couldn't even speak? Unthinkable. "Furthermore," Fenris continued, "any who question her worth will answer to me. She sacrificed her voice to save your lives. The least you can offer in return is respect." But respect, I learned, was harder to grant than fear. The nobles bowed when required, but whispered poison when they thought I couldn't hear. The servants remained terrified of my blood. And worst of all, I could see the pity in their eyes. The poisoned Omega who traded one curse for another. That night, alone in the chambers I'd been granted as Royal Chronicler, I sat at my desk and tried to write. But the words wouldn't come. Without my voice to test their rhythm, without the ability to share them aloud, the stories felt trapped inside me. For the first time since that night in the arena, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. I'd saved Fenris, yes, but what was I now? A voiceless storyteller. A chronicler who couldn't chronicle. Fenris found me there hours later, surrounded by crumpled attempts at writing, silver tears streaming down my face. "This isn't the ending I wanted for you," he said quietly, gathering me into his arms. I pulled away from his embrace and found fresh parchment. If I couldn't speak my stories, I'd write them. Even if my voice was gone, my hands still worked. Slowly, painfully, I began to write. Once upon a time, there was a girl who traded her voice for love, but unlike the stories, she knew the price when she paid it. And unlike the stories, she'd do it again. Fenris read over my shoulder, his arms tightening around me. "You're still telling stories," he murmured, "just differently now." I nodded, continuing to write. Different wasn't dead. Changed wasn't broken. I'd spent 20 years learning to find strength in solitude. Now I'd learned to find voice in silence. The moon watched through our window as I wrote, and for the first time since waking voiceless, I felt something like hope. Stories had saved us once. Perhaps they could save us again. The summons came at dawn, delivered by guards who wouldn't meet my eyes. The Council of Alphas had convened, a gathering that hadn't occurred in a decade, and they demanded my presence. Fenris stood before his mirror, adjusting the formal regalia he despised. "They have no authority here," he said, his reflection meeting my eyes. I could refuse them. I shook my head, touching the summons. We both knew what this was about. Word had spread through the kingdoms of how the curse was broken, of the Omega who bled quicksilver and the king who drank it. Some called it a miracle. Others whispered darker words: abomination, blood magic, crimes against nature. "You don't have to do this," he said, turning to face me. "Let me handle them." But I was already reaching for my formal robes, silver-threaded black, that marked my position as royal chronicler. If they wanted to put me on trial, I'd face them with what dignity I had left. The great hall had been transformed into a courtroom. 5 alpha thrones arranged in a semicircle, each occupied by leaders of the major packs. At the center sat Alpha Morgana of the Northern Territories, ancient and sharp-eyed, her white hair braided with bones. The gallery overflowed with spectators. I saw my family among them. Beta Marcus stood stiff and uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze. My mother wept silently. My siblings whispered behind raised hands. Only Kai watched me with something like understanding. "Lysandra of Valdris." Alpha Morgana's voice cut through the murmur like a blade. "You stand accused of blood corruption, unnatural practices, and the defilement of an alpha bloodline. How do you answer?" I opened my mouth from habit, then closed it. Fenris stepped forward, but Morgana raised a hand. "The accused must answer for herself. If she cannot speak, perhaps she can write?" A scribe hurried forward with parchment and ink. Not silver ink. I noticed the deliberate insult. Plain black ink for the Omega, who thought herself special. I wrote carefully. I answer that I saved the Alpha King from a curse that would have destroyed him and countless innocents. I regret nothing. Morgana read it aloud, her tone making the words sound like condemnation. "Pride as well as corruption. Tell us, Omega, do you deny drinking the Alpha King's blood?" I wrote, "To save my life after sacrificing it for his? And do you deny that he consumed yours? To break a curse that threatened the realm." "Unnatural," one of the other alphas spat. "Omega blood should never enter an alpha. It disrupts the natural order." The crowd murmured agreement. I saw my father nod, my mother look away. "Show them," Morgana commanded. "Show us all what you've become." I knew what she wanted. Slowly, I drew my ceremonial knife and cut my palm. Quicksilver blood welled up, and the crowd gasped. Several wolves near the front scrambled back. "Poison!" someone whispered. "She bleeds poison!" "And yet the Alpha King lives," Fenris interjected, stepping beside me. "I've touched her blood, tasted it, been bathed in it. I stand before you unchanged, except for the breaking of my curse. How do you explain that?" "Perhaps," Alpha Grimner of the Eastern Packs suggested coldly. Because you were already corrupted. The witch's curse had already made you unnatural. Two wrongs converging. Or perhaps, Fenris countered, because her blood isn't poison at all. It's medicine. It just happens to be medicine too strong for those who don't need it. You speak of medicine? Morgana laughed harshly. She killed 3 healers who tried to tend her as a child. Her touch withers plants. Her blood burns through living flesh. That's not medicine. That's death incarnate. I wrote furiously. I killed no one intentionally. My affliction was not chosen, merely born. How many has the Alpha King killed? How many have all of you? Yet you judge me for blood I cannot change. But Morgana wasn't finished. Bring forth the witness. My heart sank as they led in Elder Theron, the healer who'd discovered my condition. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes held the same disgust. Tell the court, Morgana instructed, about the prophecy. Theron cleared his throat. When the Omega's blood first revealed itself, I consulted the old texts. There was a prophecy, ancient and nearly forgotten. When silver blood runs in Omega veins, the natural order shall be broken. The weak shall poison the strong, the cursed shall corrupt the pure, and the moon herself shall weep for what her children have become. The crowd erupted. I heard calls for my execution, for purification by fire. Fenris moved closer, his body tense with barely contained violence. I wrote desperately. Prophecies can be interpreted many ways. Perhaps the natural order needed breaking. Perhaps strength and weakness aren't what we thought. Silence, Morgana commanded, though I hadn't spoken. The evidence is clear. You are an anomaly, a mistake that should have been corrected at birth. Your continued existence threatens the stability of pack hierarchy. She stood, and the other alphas followed. It is the judgment of this council that you be stripped of all rank and position. You will be branded with the mark of the cursed and exiled beyond Packlands. No, Fenris said, his voice deadly quiet. You forget. This is my kingdom, my hall, my mate you're condemning. Your mate? Alpha Grimnar scoffed. You haven't marked her. She bears no claiming bite. I haven't marked her because her blood would kill me if I tried. Fenris snarled. But she is mine in every way that matters. I touched his arm, stopping him. The crowd watched as I wrote one final message, holding it up for all to see. I offer a different trial. Let any alpha here touch my blood and survive. If even one can withstand what Fenris has endured, I'll accept your judgment. But if none can, then accept that perhaps your precious natural order has already changed. The hall went silent. I cut my palm deeper, letting mercury blood pool in my cupped hand. I walked to each alpha in turn, offering them the challenge. None would touch it. As I thought, Fenris said into the silence. You condemn what you fear because you're too weak to understand it. Lysandra's blood responds to need. I needed to be free of my curse. It freed me. I needed to live. It saved me. It's not poison. It's potential. I returned to the center, my blood still pooling, and did something that shocked even Fenris. I raised my palm to my lips and drank. The effect was gradual, but undeniable. The constant ache in my throat, which had been slowly healing over the past weeks with the help of my blood's regenerative properties, eased further. The scar tissue that had been forming began to reshape itself, and deep in my chest, something long dormant stirred to life. When I opened my mouth, a single word emerged. Raw, painful, but undeniably real. Choose. The first word I'd spoken since the arena. It scraped like glass, but it was mine. Choose. I repeated, my voice gaining strength though still rough. Fear, or evolution. The crowd erupted into chaos, but I saw something new in their eyes. Not just fear now, but awe. The Omega who drank her own poison and spoke with a voice of silver and shadow. Fenris took my bloodied hand in his, raising it high. The trial is over. Any who wish to challenge my judgment can face me in single combat. Any who wish to evolve, to see beyond the limitations of our ancestors, are welcome in my kingdom. One by one, the alphas retreated. But as the crowd dispersed, I noticed something else. Younger wolves lingering, outcasts and omegas, and those who'd never quite fit the mold, looking at me with something like hope. As the hall emptied, Kai approached, my youngest brother, the only one who'd ever shown me kindness. Sister, he said quietly, I'm proud of you. I smiled, my voice still too damaged for many words, but I managed one more. Stay? He nodded, and I knew I'd gained the first of many. The first to choose evolution over tradition. The transformation had begun. The moon was new when the assassins came, a night of perfect darkness that should have hidden any approach. But my blood knew. It always knew when death walked near. I woke to quicksilver warmth spreading across my chest, my blood heating in warning. Beside me, Fenris stirred, his instincts still sharp, even without the curse. What is... he began, then his nostrils flared. Wolfsbane! Someone's burning wolfsbane! We rolled from the bed as the first arrow pierced the window, its tip gleaming with poison. More followed, a rain of death that would have killed any normal wolf in seconds. But Fenris wasn't normal anymore. My blood had changed him in ways we were still discovering. The door burst open. Not one assassin, but a dozen, all wearing the masks of the purifiers. Extremists who believed in maintaining pure bloodlines. They moved with coordinated precision. Take the Alpha alive, one commanded. The abomination dies. They underestimated us. Fenris fought with a fury that needed no curse to be terrifying. While I did something they never expected, I bled deliberately, flicking drops of quicksilver at our attackers. Where my blood touched, it burned through their defenses, revealing the fear beneath their fanaticism. But there were too many. And then I saw him, the one who'd stayed back, chanting in the old tongue, weaving something dark in the air. A binding spell. Not for Fenris, for me. The magic hit like chains of ice, freezing my blood in my veins. I couldn't move, couldn't bleed, couldn't even scream as they closed in. Fenris roared, trying to reach me, but they'd planned for his protection. The prophecy was clear, the spellweaver said, pulling out a blade that glowed with sickly green light. Your kind breaks the natural order, but there's still time to correct nature's mistake. The blade descended toward my heart, and I knew with horrible certainty that this wasn't ordinary steel. This was God-touched metal forged to kill the unkillable. Time slowed. I saw Fenris's eyes widen in horror, felt the blade's cursed edge part the air above my chest, and in that moment of approaching death, I understood something fundamental about my condition. My blood had never been poison. It had always been choice. Every drop that killed had done so because those it touched were trapped by tradition, by hierarchy, by their own rigid nature. They couldn't change, so they died. But Fenris had chosen change, chosen to see beyond what he'd been taught, and so my blood had freed rather than destroyed him. The blade touched my skin, and I made my choice. Instead of resisting, I embraced it. I let every drop of quicksilver in my veins rush to meet the cursed metal, not to fight, but to transform. The blade pierced my chest, seeking my heart, and found something impossible. My blood was changing, shifting from silver to something else. Something that had no color because it was all colors, no form because it was all potential. The God-touched blade, forged to destroy, met blood that existed to transform, and reality hiccuped. The spell weaver screamed as his magic reversed, the binding that held me snapping back to entangle him. The blade in my chest dissolved, its divine purpose unmade by something more fundamental than divinity, pure, undiluted choice. Power erupted from the wound in my chest, not violent but inexorable, spreading through the room like dawn breaking. Where it touched the purifiers, something extraordinary happened. They didn't die. They changed. The wolf who'd led them fell to his knees, as his pure bloodline suddenly wasn't so pure anymore. I saw his eyes shift colors, his perfect form developing the kind of beautiful imperfections that spoke of hybrid heritage. "What have you done?" The former leader gasped, staring at his hands as they shifted between shapes. "Shown you the truth," I said, my voice stronger than it had been since the arena. The wound in my chest was closing, leaving a scar that looked like a silver starburst. There is no pure bloodline. We're all mixed, all hybrid, all choosing every day what shape our souls will take. I just made it visible. Fenris reached me as the last of the assassins fled. He gathered me against him, his hands shaking as they checked the already healing wound. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "When I saw that blade, you can't lose me," I said, touching his face. "Not anymore. Don't you see? The curse wasn't just broken that night in the arena. It was transformed. We transformed." "I don't understand." I stood, feeling stronger than I ever had. "The witch who cursed you, I met her, in the space between life and death. She said something. Curses can't be broken, only changed. And she was right. Your curse, my curse, they didn't disappear. They evolved." "Into what?" "Into choice. Into the ability to help others transform. The witch didn't curse you to punish you. She cursed you to prepare you." "For what?" "For this. For a world where bloodlines matter less than choices, where strength isn't about dominance but adaptation. Your curse made you capable of surviving my blood. My blood made me capable of transforming your curse. Together, we're something new." "And the assassins? We'll spread the word of what happened here. Some will fear it, but others—" I smiled, remembering the young wolves who'd lingered after my trial. "Others will come seeking the change we represent." As if in answer, a knock came at the door. When Fenris opened it, we found a young Omega standing there. Her eyes, two different colors. Her form caught between wolf and human in a way that should have been impossible. "Please," she whispered. "I heard what happened. I've been hiding what I am my whole life. Can you help me?" I extended my hand, letting her see the silver scars that marked my palm. "We all hide until we're ready to be seen. Come in." Tell us your story." As she entered, I caught Fenris's eye. This was just the beginning. Every transformed assassin would carry the tale. Every outcast would hear that there was a place where different wasn't wrong but revolutionary. We'd spent so long trying to break our curses. But in the end, the real power had been in embracing them, transforming them, choosing to see beauty where others saw only aberration. The sacrifice had never been about death. It had been about letting go of who we thought we had to be and becoming who we truly were. 6 months after the assassination attempt, the castle looked nothing like the fortress of fear it had once been. The black stones remained, but now they were covered with silver-veined ivy that bloomed with flowers of impossible colors. The throne room, once a place of judgment, had become a sanctuary where the transformed gathered to share their stories. I stood on the highest balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of change. Below, the courtyard bustled with activity. Wolves of every size and shape, some shifting freely between forms, others locked in beautiful impossibilities that defied the old categories. A child ran past with wings of a raven and eyes of a wolf, laughing as her mother chased after her. "The Council of Alphas has formally dissolved," Fenris said, joining me. He moved differently now, with a fluidity that spoke of perfect integration between man and wolf. "Morgana was the last to concede. She came here herself, asked to be transformed. And she's in the library reading your chronicles. She cried when she read about the first Omega who came to us, the one whose howl could shatter stars, but who'd been muted by his pack for being too powerful." I leaned into him, feeling the familiar spark where our skin touched. My blood still ran silver, but now it pulsed with every color of possibility when I chose to let it. His blood carried traces of that same quicksilver, making him immune not just to poisons, but to the very concept of unchangeable fate. "Any word from Valdris?" I asked. "Your father sent another letter. Still refuses to visit, but Kai came. He's in the Eastern Garden, talking with the other young wolves about starting a new kind of pack, one without hierarchies. And there's something else." Fenris continued, producing a letter sealed with unfamiliar wax. From the Eastern Kingdoms, the Empress's own seal. I opened it, scanning the elegant script. "To the Silver Chronicler and the Evolved King, word of your transformation has reached even our distant shores. We have our own cursed ones, those born with scales instead of fur, who breathe water instead of air. For generations, we have hidden them, ashamed of their difference. We are ashamed no longer. I write to propose an alliance, not of kingdoms but of evolution. Let us build a world where every impossible child has a place to belong. With hope for tomorrow, Empress Nalani of the Depths." "She's coming here," Fenris said, "with a delegation of their transformed. The world is changing, Lysandra, because of what you chose that night in the arena." "What we chose?" I corrected. A commotion in the courtyard drew our attention. A group of new arrivals, refugees from a pack that had exiled them for impure manifestations. Among them, an elderly woman who leaked starlight when she cried. Twins who shared one body but two distinct wolf forms. A young man whose shadow moved independently of his body. They looked up at the castle with the same expression I'd worn a year ago. Fear mixed with desperate hope. "Shall we?" Fenris asked, offering his arm. We descended together, meeting them in the courtyard. The elderly woman fell to her knees when she recognized us, starlight tears streaming down her face. Please, she whispered. We have nowhere else to go. They said we're abominations. You're exactly what you're meant to be, I interrupted gently, helping her stand. My voice still carried the rasp of silver and shadow, but it was strong now, sure. There are no mistakes here, only possibilities waiting to unfold. One of the twins stepped forward boldly. Is it true, what they say about you? That you died and came back? That you can transform curses into gifts? I can't transform anything, I said, letting my quicksilver blood rise to the surface of my skin so it glowed softly in the dying light. But I can show you how to transform yourself, how to stop fighting what you are and start becoming what you could be. And if we're too broken? The Shadow Man asked, his voice barely audible while his shadow signed the words boldly. Fenris laughed warmly. Then you'll fit right in. We collect the impossible here. We celebrate it. As the new arrivals were led inside, I remained in the courtyard. The first stars were appearing, and among them the moon rose. No longer full, but a perfect crescent that seemed to smile. Do you regret it? Fenris asked quietly. The life you might have had? Normal blood, a normal voice, a normal existence. I turned to him, seeing my reflection in his silver-touched eyes. The woman looking back bore little resemblance to the terrified Omega who'd arrived in chains. This woman stood tall, scarred, but not broken, powerful, not despite her strangeness, but because of it. Every curse is a choice waiting to be made. I said, I chose to stop seeing myself through their eyes and start seeing myself through my own. That's the real transformation, not the blood or the voice or the power, just the choice to be exactly who we are. And who are we? I smiled, taking his hand as more transformed souls found their way to our doors. We're the proof that evolution isn't about becoming perfect, I said. It's about becoming whole, broken parts and all. The castle bells rang, announcing the evening meal where former nobles sat beside former outcasts, where stories were shared in a dozen different ways. As we walked inside to join them, I thought about the girl who'd believed fairy tales were lies told to make the pain of reality bearable. She'd been wrong. Fairy tales weren't lies. They were promises, not that someone would save you, but that you had the power to save yourself. Not that curses could be broken, but that they could be transformed into something beautiful. And sometimes, just sometimes, the beast and the beauty turned out to be the same person, looking in a mirror and finally seeing themselves clearly. Welcome home, I whispered to each new arrival, and meant it with every drop of quicksilver in my veins. Welcome to the place where your curse becomes your crown. The transformation was complete. Not just mine, not just Fenris's, but the world's, one impossible soul at a time, choosing to shine rather than hide.